Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Straight Talk with Bren O'Brien and Tim Rowe from The Straight, brought to you by our sponsors, Inglis and Darley. Today, Vin Cox's next move in the Bloodstock sector. We reflect on the legacy of George Smith, a $150 million stallion, plus Aussies busy at Tats, and history for Fastnet Rock. We also chat to Mitch Bates at Inglis about English Digital and a Melbourne Cup runner for the English team. In racing, Tim and I debate how good is the racing blogger, challenges and opportunities in WA, and the ins and outs of the Melbourne Cup. And in wagering, we chat bowling, Entain, and betr. Tim, plenty to chat about this week, but probably the breaking news this week came out Wednesday. Vin Cox announcing, well, we've long waiting to see what was coming next for Vin since he left Geelong. Obviously, he departed Geelong relatively suddenly in March. He served out a 6-month gardening leave time, but it hasn't taken much time after that gardening leave for Vin to pop up again. Interestingly, in a consultancy role, while Bloodstock role with Star Thoroughbreds. I guess, did it surprise you, Tim, that he was end up back in the Bloodstock world, or do you feel like this is just part of the next step or next part of the story for Vin?
Not a total surprise. That's his background. That's how he started, was a Bloodstock agent, and working the sales, and he's worked his way up. He got to running Magic Millions, and of course Godolphin, and then Geelong, some very high-end jobs, I guess, in the industry, but he never lost that eye for a horse or the love of seeking out horses and trying to find the next superstar. Obviously, Godolphin, he bought in secret from the sales, and a few good horses at Geelong as well, different budgets, of course. Godolphin had to be quite sort of select, I guess, surprisingly so, for some might say, but he's always had a good eye for a horse, and it's sort of back to the future with Denise Martin, a good fit with Brett Howard bowing out.
Yeah, and I caught up with Vin during the week. Have a bit of a brief chat about his next adventure.
Ideally, what I wanted to do, once my time cleaned up with Geelong, was to do a bunch of freelance stuff.
Yeah.
And, just sitting at home, minding my own business, the phone rang, with Denise, and, Denise, how are you? We've always got on very well. She just put it to me, and I was, oh, wow, okay, I'd never thought of that. And obviously there was the situation with Brett, and Brett's done an unbelievable job for Star Thoroughbreds, and I've known Brett and been friends with Brett for over 30 years, probably close to 40 years, and enormous respect and over that time and friendship. So there was that bit to play out. And so, Denise rang me, and we nutted it out over the last couple of weeks. And very, very excited to be joining Denise and Star and Chris Wallace's team and working closely with them. And hopefully, I'd love to say, having somewhere near the success that Brett achieved during his tenure.
I was going to say, it's a hard act to follow, but you're probably had a few phone calls in your last few months. Then, what was about this one that sort of led you thought, well, this is the right mix for me?
Look, it's right in my sweet spot. I enjoy sales, thoroughbred sales. I enjoy looking at yearlings and assessing yearlings. It's working with high-end operators and operators that work at an elite level, and that appeals to me immensely. Denise is, she's without reproach in terms of her ethics and business model. And you'd have to say, working with a stable like the Wallace stable, or the horses end up in the Wallace stable, who, again, he's the gold standard of trainers in the country at the present time. So really it was just something that very much appealed to me. It was, like I said, just fits what I want to do. And there's other gigs and roles that can work in and around it. And I said, sort of working much like Brett operated. He had his own Bloodstock agency. Not that I see myself as being an inverted commas Bloodstock agent, but certainly sort of consultancy work and an agency is required.
Yeah, it's an interesting one there, Tim. Like, obviously, it's part of the plan for Vin. There's probably other things on the horizon. He spoke a bit more in detail about international opportunities that might open up. Obviously, this is for next year, the 2026 yearling series, but the view to maybe doing things going forward. Yeah, it's an interesting arrangement. I think it'll work well for Vin. I think it'll work very well for Denise. And I don't think we'll see Star Thoroughbred step back at all in terms of their investment. Speaking of Bloodstock people, we lost George Smith during the week, Tim. Remarkable record and legacy when you look back on it. Matt Stewart's written an excellent story this week about his impact, both from the stuff that he did from Stockwell Stud, but also what he was able to do in selecting champion racehorses for Tommy Smith, Bart Cummings, Gay Waterhouse, Lee Friedman, the biggest name in racing. Often bloodstock agents, a little bit forgotten in the success stories of these trainers, but geez, they couldn't do it without them, could they, Tim?
No, the eye for a horse, I think that was George's strength, and we see it in the market now all the time where you look at a pedigree and go, how did that horse make so much money? Or a horse that's perceived to be extremely well bred sell for not much at all, and there's veterinary issues, but a lot of it comes down to conformation and physique. I mean, the look of the horse, and that's what George focused on primarily. From what I'd never met George, but what I've ascertained and what people have told me and those that were close to him, he was all about how the horse looked rather than pedigree was very much secondary.
Yeah, it's an interesting bloodstock selection because experience does count for a lot. And over time, there's an argument that bloodstock agents only get better as they get older, Tim, as they get more experience in terms of their selection. So, and George was still going around, probably 5 or 6 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago, and came from extraordinarily humble origins, coming out of an orphanage in Sunbury to be able to become one of the most influential, background players in Australian racing over that journey. So, I urge you to go and have a look at Matt Stewart's story. It's an excellent story, an excellent reflection on a man who made a significant impact. Talking about major impacts, Tim, how much would you pay for a stallion? $3 million US paid for a share in Not This Time, a 2% share, and even that value is $150 million US, or if you're playing in Australian dollars, 225 million Australian dollars. It's big money, Tim, but it does show you how lucrative and how at that top end, that sharp end of this bloodstock industry globally, there's a lot of money.
It is, but not this time. Sort of, I think some have compared him to I'm Invincible with the rise up the ranks, what he's done, and he's sort of second on the US size table this year, and he's just continually gone up and producing a lot of good horses. So, getting access to a stallion like that for Hillendale, John Secure and his son Jez, who sort of plays a pretty integral role now, and we've seen that name, Hillendale, in Australian markets the last couple of years, buying mares and certainly yearlings with Will Johnson. So, in some ways it makes sense, particularly when you consider the booming yearling market over there at the moment, sort of spurred on by the tax incentives from President Trump that enacted. So, because they can write off 100% of their yearling purchases immediately, and that will drive demand to the yearling sales, and therefore breeders can reinvest.
Yeah, and Not This Time's only 11, Tim. So, I think Sebastian Hutch alluded to this a couple of weeks ago, that the current crop of young stallions in Australia, I mean, Intermischief's still the king over there and still leading the size. That size championship. That may change after this weekend's Breeders' Cup, but, Not This Time he's second at the moment, and it's at only 11. You've got Gunrunner, who's 12, who's third. You've got horses like Constitution and Practical Joke, who are sort of relatively sort of mid sort of way through their stallion career. There's a lot of upside for that in that American market at the moment. And as you said, that probably tax incentive and maybe a little bit of the Netflix effect. I saw our old mate Michael Overone turn up the other day being interviewed about buying a share at that same sale, buying a share in a Breeders' Cup participant this weekend. American racing is in a really interesting spot at the pointy end at the moment, and we'll see that this weekend in the Breeders' Cup. So a fascinating thing. Talking about international, Tim, just a quick sort of view across the Tattersalls horses and training sales. Australians have always been busy there, and they're busy again this week.
They have, the main stables, Chris Waller's had a lot of success buying Europeans from, for the last decade or so, and probably longer, and, Kieran Maher as well, especially those staying horses, and Henry Dwyer, last couple of years got in the action on the back of Asfura doing so well over there, and he sort of bought 2 or 3. And what's interesting from Henry's horses, reading that at least one of them might stay over there till sort of Royal Ascot next year and then come back to Australia. So there's plenty of options, and obviously his clients are getting behind him. But Annabelle Neesham as well was on the board, and Matt Laurie bought one as well with Hubie de Burgh, who's another agent well known down here, sort of servicing both hemispheres.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. You've got a feeling that Henry might be spending most of his Australian winters. I mean, if I lived in Ballarat, I'd be spending most of my Australian winters out of Ballarat anyway, but it seems like the next few years he's spending a lot of time going to the Northern Hemisphere. I wanted to round off the sort of bloodstock summary section just with a quick chat around the Cox Plate last week. Fastnet Rock Quinella. I wrote a story in this earlier this week. First time in 77 years we've had the same sire, Quinella, a Cox Plate. A terrific effort. Both Northern Hemisphere bred horses, which is fascinating, and both out of Galileo mares. Now it's the third time Fastnet Rock V16 has featured in a Fastnet Rock Quinella in a Group 1. Buckaroo again last year, for the Turnbull Stakes, but way back in her, which won the Pretty Polly Stakes at the Curragh, there was another Fastnet Rock filly that ran second, and a Galileo out of a Galileo mare. So quite remarkable in that regard that we've got a situation where that cross, and probably not that surprising given it's Coolmore, but that cross continues to produce that. And if you look back through Group 1 Quadellas, it's a terrific effort for Fastnet Rock. Of course, we lost earlier this spring, but his legacy remains so strong, and we'll probably see him at the pointy end of the broodmare size table again this year, Tim.
Yeah, and as you say, I just Coolmore's got so many great mares. It sort of makes sense if you go to a top stallion with top mares, you're going to produce good horses more often than not. So in some ways it's not surprising, but still a great effort, and more to come from those two horses at Flemington.
And joining us now on Straight Talk is Mitch Bates from Inglis to talk all things Inglis Digital, and a big week coming up. Mitch, I guess the headline act this week for Inglis Digital is the fact that, quite famously now, half yours, a graduate of Inglis Digital, set to be one of the main chances, obviously a Caulfield Cup winner, one of the main chances in Tuesday's big race, the Melbourne Cup. I mean, it's a great story for Inglis Digital to be able to tell, and he's a relative rarity in that regard, but it must be nice to have, such a better horse, and a race that, let's face it, in recent years has been probably dominated by overseas horses. Great to have an Australian bred sold on Inglis Digital, running around with such prominence on Tuesday.
Yeah, thanks, Bren. Thanks for having me on the show. Yeah, he's really exciting for Inglis Digital to have the favourite for the Melbourne Cup on Tuesday. Like, just look at where he's come from in the space of 12 months. Like, he got purchased online for $305,000 last November, and it's gone from essentially kind of like a mid-league horse to now Group 1 winner and favourite for a Melbourne Cup. I think he's earned over $3.8 million in earnings, and just the better horse for Inglis Digital, and just keeps going from strength to strength.
Yeah, so his strength is that.
At the time when he was sold, obviously Colin McKenna was half, or sort of owned 50%. I think Kieran Maher owned the other 50%. And what Calvin McAvoy told me a week or two ago was, Kieran thought that wasn't bad money, but I know he and Will Bourne are sort of brewing that decision to let him go now. But that's the opportunity that the market provides.
Yeah, it's definitely right. And I don't think there's too many horses that sneak under Kieran Maher's radar. I think they've got a pretty good team there, and this one's just slipped by. And that's the thing with Inglis Digital. It doesn't matter if it's a full horse or a share. Like, there's just opportunities every couple of weeks where you can, if you do your homework and your research, you can find a gem.
Yeah, talk us through it. Obviously, we talk about he's obviously the banner Inglis graduate, but obviously it's a big week or big time of year. There's feature races every week. There's feature races in Sydney and Melbourne this weekend. We've obviously got Melbourne Cup, as we mentioned. Talk us through some of the recent graduates from an Inglis perspective that are, that are sort of flying the flag at the moment.
Yeah, so we've got Headley Grange as well, who's also one of the leading contenders for the big dance on Tuesday up at Randwick. He won last start on the, what do you mean last start? Won the Rich Race last start. Looks promising prospect. You've got Private Eye, we sold a share in, a 5% share a couple of years ago now. He's continues to run well, like he's found a new lease of life this prep and just running very, very well. You've also got Oscar's Fortune. He was a Inglis Digital Horse of the Year. He's running over in WA this weekend in a Group 3. You've got She's an Alibi, young up-and-coming horse. Purchased as a weanling off the platform for $10,000. She runs around the Group 3 Vanity on Saturday. Caballas, he's running this weekend. You could have bought him off the platform. He's flying for Beyond Baker. And there's just lots and lots. Like, even the shares, like you should look at the share, like the share in Nadal we sold. I think he's around this spring. Probably might go back to back in the Meteorite. And yeah, there's just, and Charmstone as well. Like, she's a share. We'll see her again this spring. But yeah, just plenty of opportunities.
I know when Bren and I reach out to the media rep at Inglis, Peter Fitzgerald, and we ask him for some information, he gets back to us. But I know he goes to you. You're the stats and data guy at Inglis. What sort of trends are you seeing with the market at the moment, particularly Inglis, and you sort of calendar year, sort of not far away from closing? How's it looking?
It's been a strong year for digital. We're up a little bit on year. There's a real appetite for racehorses still, like especially those that have kind of proven around the metro standard, the ones that have kind of likely raced 3-year-olds. Like, they always sell very well. And I think it's just a great way to get into the game. If you don't have to wait, if you buy a yearling or weanling, you can come straight to digital, get a racehorse that could compete within 2-3 weeks straight away, race in your jurisdiction, and yeah, just get involved in the racing game. I think it's really good for new people looking to get involved in racing as well.
Yeah, I think part of it's probably that consistency of coming back to the auctions all the time, which sort of takes us to next week's auction. I mean, you roll from one to the other every fortnight. I mean, what are we expecting coming up, in this week's auction? And there are a couple of offerings you think will catch the eye of buyers?
Yeah, I've had a little early look. A couple of nice shares again in this sale. There's another share in Finacle, 5% share. There's 2.5% in a young 3-year-old Morris filly, a bleed called Morisu Oju for Kira Ma. She's going around the Oaks on Thursday, so you could potentially be buying a share on Wednesday, running a Group 1 the very next day, which is pretty exciting. I think she's around the $15 at the moment, so you're getting the live chance there. And we've also got a stallion share in Cool as a Beal.
And obviously the noms aren't out yet. The next Thursday, and then on Champions Day, there's a couple of Inglis graduate races. The Inglis Banner for 2-year-olds was at Moonee Valley previously, and now being run down the straight at Flemington. Any sort of early whispers or chat that you're hearing of horses that may be heading that direction?
Unfortunately, I haven't heard any whispers yet of the early 2-year-olds heading down. I know last year there was a good one within the law, and we heard about pretty early on. I know the Derby team were pretty strong with her, and they proved right. She's gone on to bigger and better things. She won the first 2 English races and gone on and ran in almost everything. And then I think she's going around the Oaks again on Thursday too. So she's a very, very good filly. We've got the bracelet. I know one horse is going down the bracelet Thursday. O'Diamond Lil is heading down from Sydney. She could be a good chance. Roll forward, and Group 3 winner this prep, then kind of stepped up in grade in a couple of races. So maybe back to the 6 hour at Flemington could be her race.
Good chance for obviously Arthur Inglis is in that horse, get some of his own money back there on Thursday.
Yeah, should pick. He has been giving it a bit out with the extra bonuses though as well, because they're going very strongly. But I think this year there's eight gone off so far, and across the 2 seasons we're paid out $4.1 million in extra bonuses. So giving out plenty to the owners as well, whenever that's part of the English race series.
Yeah, I was
Arthur.
going to say, just finally on that, Mitch, you talk about these English races across the Flemington Carnival. I mean, it's a really important part of the engagement for people to get to these big carnivals and be able to see their horses run. And it's a great opportunity to have those races sort of set out for these type of horses, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly right. Like you want to have owners going to those big days, and on Oaks Day and Stakes Day, two of the biggest in the racing calendar in Australia. And then you've got the Millennium up here in Randwick. That's only a good day. And then as well with the extra bonuses, what we're doing now, like we're putting those on pretty much every week. There's 50 across, predominantly New Victoria, but we try to put them on a lot of the country racing carnivals as well. So then the country getting their big days, they got an extra bonus on. So trying to spread the love.
Mitch, great to catch up. Thanks for your time. And all the best. Obviously, half yours will be carrying Inglis's support on Tuesday. It's a big week. It's always a big time of year, but it's Inglis graduates to the fore, and it'll be fascinating to see how he goes on Tuesday.
Thanks, Bren. Thanks, Tim. It should go well. A bit of rain about, which will help him, so looks a very good chance.
Tim, it's a huge week of racing. We've got Derby Day on Saturday. We've got the Golden Eagle. We've got the Melbourne Cup on Tuesday. We've got Oaks Day. It's just Champions Day. It is an awesome week of racing for racing people. And the man who's captured all the attention is not, a local per se. He's a man who's come in here, Stephen Power, the racing blogger. Now, we've had a bit of discussions across our WhatsApp groups about Blogsy this week. I don't think I've seen an import hotter than this since Double Trigger came to the 1994 Melbourne Cup, it might have been. Now, that didn't end well for Double Trigger. He was well beaten in that race. But your thoughts, Tim, on his impact and what he's been able to do. From your perspective, he's been here since, I think, last week. He's given so much energy and so much coverage. Race Victoria clearly tipping in a bit of cash to get him over here. Has it been a success, do you believe?
Well, I backed Double Trigger that year, unfortunately. So sorry, Mark Johnson, I'm on stopped him. But I'm all for Blogsy. He's done a great job. I don't know whose idea it was. I've got a feeling it might have been Simon Morris, who sort of played chauffeur, former trainer and assistant trainer, taking a lot of the credit for Asfura, funnily enough. I think he's sort of had something to do with it, but I don't think even the marketing department at RV could have estimated just how well he's gone. Blogsy, he's obviously hasn't slept for 2 weeks, it seems like. He was at the Sandown Dogs last night, and then at Flemington Track Week this morning with Chris Waller. So he's whatever he's getting paid, he's well and truly earning it. He's resonating with pretty cynical punters and still resonating with most of them. I know mightn't have convinced you, Bren, but the majority, I think, have got behind him. The participants are embracing him. Chris, as I said, Chris Waller, Gay Waterhouse, James McDonald, and giving quite, insightful interviews. So I'm all for it. He's done a good job. Whether he can sustain a couple weeks hard at the best times, but the way he's going, he'll keep charging through day after day. From morning, dawn till late into the night. Good on him.
It's certainly given a prominence to it. I guess there's a couple of questions sort of around this one. The first one is, I think he's definitely cut through to the racing audience, and they probably enjoyed his enthusiasm. I wonder how sustainable that is. Like, if you brought him back next year or whatever else, because everything's 10 stars, everything's the best ever, which I think is awesome from a marketing perspective. I don't know how sustainable that is from a content perspective, and maybe I'm being a little bit cynical here. But if you keep on turning up all the time saying this is the best ever, after a while, people are going to sit there and go, well, the effect gets lessened a little bit. Now, that's his shtick, and that's the way he works. And I have no problem with that. And I said, from a marketing perspective, I think that's worked. The question is, how much has he got cut through to a broader audience? Not saying he hasn't, but social media tend to see within a bubble. Like what you see on social media, you tend to be fed back towards you. So you feel like, wow, he's really prominent. He's on everything I see. Well, to be perfectly honest, the algorithm's not doing its job of not serving that stuff up to you and me, is it, Tim? So it'd be interesting to see what cut through he's got. I said, I'm not saying that it's not happening, but I think it'd be interesting to see how Racing Victoria measure that going forward. What he has done, Tim, and I want to touch on this point as a significant thing, he's really opened up this discussion, which I think last night when he went to the Dogs was kind of interesting. Like he was literally behind the boxes and walking alongside the track at one point. Good on GRV and Damien for actually making the effort to sort of give him that access. But it really highlighted the fact that we are very much still stuck in a world sometimes with racing where, there's the horses and there are you, and some of it's for safety reason, which I get, but there's also this sort of blockage between accessibility for the general public or accessibility for general people and the racetrack, the racing industry itself. For me, it's a really good sign of like, you need to be able to open up these things. You need to be able to give people the accessibility. What racing does create, it's an amazing experience when you're there at the racetrack, is that connection with the horses and with all those things. So I think what racing needs to learn out of this is to say, great, we've got this guy, Stephen Power. He's so energetic. He's like, he's a generational talent. Like he's not a guy, you couldn't give me or you a camera and we'd do that, Tim. We'd be sick of it after 5 minutes and not very good of it. Now, he does bring a level of enthusiasm, which is infectious. But what I think is really key is to give the opportunity for the next people to be able to do this. Give the opportunity for local Australian people to be at the races and to show that enthusiasm. And I think, for me, like, I'm not going to get into the, we had this discussion earlier this week. Who would we take? Would it be Blogsy or Ben Scarf? I'd stated on my thoughts around the Ben Scarf stuff. No problem with Ben himself. He makes a living. He does what he needs to do. No problem with him. I don't think necessarily it's great promotion for racing. I think it's probably good promotion from a punting perspective. But I think you need to have this concept of connection and whatever else. And I think within a racetrack, there's so many restrictions, Tim. When you walk around a track, unless you're given that sort of all access pass, you don't get that. And what we talk about the F1 program, the Netflix program, and the need to be able to replicate that. And, that's where we need to be. Well, accessibility is key. And racing needs to try to find a way to open up that. And not just to influencers, but to anybody, because anybody can walk along and go, I'm seeing something. Now I'm going to film it. Now I'm going to share with people. That's the key. So for me, that's probably the thing I take out of it, Tim. I'm a big, I said, it's probably not for me. I'm not the sort of person who's going to jump up and down saying this is awesome. I'm so engaged about racing because of what Stephen Power is doing. But what I do see out of what he's doing is an opportunity for Australian racing to change the way that it engages with content creators on a day-to-day basis.
I think he has got cut through on mainstream as well. Yes, he's been on the racing channels, but I wouldn't be surprised if he bobs up on Channel 9's Melbourne coverage next week and goes mainstream. Look, I've found myself watching him drinking a pint of Guinness on social, probably during my work hours. Sorry, Bren, but that's what I found myself doing. I've been engaged in that. Why?
That was the best pint of Guinness ever. This is the best pint of Guinness ever. I've never had a better pint of Guinness. My only question, Tim, is what happens next time he drinks a pint of Guinness? Is that the best one yet? Like at what point do you sit there and go, hang on, this guy's just put mayonnaise on it? Like, is he a salesman? Of course he is. I don't, like, that's probably, but that, infectious enthusiasm becomes less and less infectious with time, in my opinion.
Put on him and keep going, Blogsy. I'm all right behind you. We'll get him on the podcast one day.
And he's punting, and he's living the life. Like, he's living the great life. And if I was a UK expat, or someone coming out from here, I'd be like, I want to do that. That looks awesome. Now, you might not quite the same accessibility, but yeah, like I said, I was probably more cynical to start with. The more I see of him, I'm more like, oh yeah, there is a charm to this. But there's also an opportunity here for racing to, break down the walls a little bit, and just to stop the people with green coats or red coats at the gate from stopping people coming in and out. Like, racing is to be experienced, and you need to be able to create that opportunity for people to do that. Tim, a couple other things to touch on. The WA situation at the moment. You covered this story off earlier this week with the trainers and Rowe, where things are at. I mean, what's the latest on that one?
So, for those following the story, a couple of weeks ago, the trainers or the leading trainers of WA wrote to Ian Edwards, the Rowe CEO, and calling for a meeting. And to Ian's credit, they met with the trainers last week. The trainers got some issues just about where the industry's heading and whether it's sustainable, cost base. We've spoken about this before. I think Rowe is unique in that it does run the WA tab and betting corporate bookmaker effectively, where no other PRA does. But yeah, so the trainers are concerned, and what I took out of the letter what was written by Simon Miller, sort of detailing the results of that meeting, were concerns about just how much thoroughbred racing is subsidising harness racing. I know those trainers don't want to cut off harness racing altogether. They know it's an important code and employer and things like that, but it is costing thoroughbred racing millions of dollars in their eyes. And Rowe are aware of that, and Ian Edwards admitted that they tried to make some changes to sort of rationalise harness racing, and the racing minister stepped in and said, no, you can't do that at the moment. So where that heads, I'm not sure. That's what I took out of the meeting, that there is probably concerningly for harness racing, and it's not unique to WA. There's, we know Victoria's certainly got financial issues in harness racing. So whether the PRA and Ian Edwards and his team can sort of rationalise it, cut costs, and sort of distribute more fairly, I'm not sure. But yeah, certainly interesting sort of times ahead for the trainers and the peak body.
Yeah, Rowe reporting this week that it's overall annual deficit dropping from $40 million last year to $17.5 million this year. So some positive news there in terms of where they sit. As you mentioned before, Rowe has driven like a lot of opportunity. Like, they've got an opportunity to drive revenue from the tab which they operate. And what was interesting was sports betting was the thing that drove a lot of the growth on the WA tab, helped to build revenue. 25% jump in sports betting in a year. That's a significant amount. It does show you how those dynamics are changing. Tim, I just wanted to touch on the Melbourne Cup. Obviously, it's a massive race. We've spoken about it before. Wagering-wise, it's 4 times bigger than any other race in the country. It has an amazing cut through. What do you make of this year's edition, Tim? I feel like it's an interesting one because I feel like there's probably enough local intrigue. Half yours you mentioned before, but probably a few other sort of horses around the tracks. But we've had a sort of litany of stories of horses being ruled out through scans. I mean, what's the vibe, do you think, like we're 4 days out for the Melbourne Cup now? What's sort of your vibe and feel now about where it sort of sits in this year?
I think it's a pretty good race. I think it's building up, touch wood, all the horses get through to Tuesday. But I think with Al Riffa coming out and, Australian Bloodstock paid a lot of money for him, and I had debating with someone yesterday about Buckaroo saying, he's almost a moral in the Melbourne Cup. Cox Plate performs the go, and I thought, well, I think this is a much stronger edition compared to last year. So I think it's holding up quite well. Yes, we lost Delius, who would have been favourite, and there's a cloud over a couple of others today. But I actually think it's building quite nicely. The narrative's good, and there's plenty of opinions from a punting perspective you can take, or angles, and get your head around the horses now as well. Sort of even the Europeans, with that form lines, you can weigh it up pretty well. Quite optimistic and looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's an interesting race. I can't remember the last time we were down an Australian bred horse's favourite of the race. Tim, maybe I'm forgetting something most recently, but half yours currently equal favourite at the moment, Valiant King, which is an interesting one as well. Yeah, it's a it always is a fascinating race. Last year, I think, provided one out of the box. We're probably a bit wondering about what the story would be out of last year's race. I don't think anyone or very few people predicted it to be a 100-to-1 winner trained by, a woman who'd won a Melbourne Cup and hadn't been back in 23 years, and all the stories around it went around Knight's Choice. It was an extraordinary story. It's an amazing race. It creates its own stories, and that's why it's such a fabled history. So, been interesting addition. Again, I just wanted to touch also, there's an article on the Straight today about Godolphin's shot at the Victoria Derby tomorrow, Tim. I think they've had 10 place getters across both derbies, might be even more. They certainly had, I think, 6 or 7 place getters in the Victoria Derby over time. Never won the Victoria Derby. They've got the short price favourite Observer. So fascinating race. Warwick Bard's written a story about that. Worthwhile checking out that article as well. Following segment is brought to you by Darley. It's been a huge month for Darley Stallions. They've been everywhere you look. Baywhack by Bivouac, taking out the Golden Rose, and War Machine, another Harry Angel, 2 strong in the Gill Guide. Tintiris and Tempted flying the flag for Street Boss. 2 Darn Hots, Philly Shiki taking out the Jim Crack, and Gayarth making his mark with Freedom Flame and Derby favourite Observer. And it doesn't stop there. Darley Stallions are front and centre, heading to the Golden Eagle, the Coolmore, Victoria Derby, and the CFO. Keep an eye out. The Darley Stallions are flying. Finally, Tim, we look at the wagering world now, and I penned an article during the week about the issue of bowlers, and I guess third-party betting on using third-party accounts is something that's sort of always been around racing for a long time, and it's a strategy employed by those at the sharp end generally to try to make sure they can get bets on if they've been blocked by other bookmakers or whatever else. But I think probably the next iteration of this is this notion that there's businesses out there quite brazenly advertising to buy accounts, and so you can basically sell your betting account, and it's against the terms and conditions of the bookmakers, but it isn't expressly illegal, and it most likely is legal to do so. Anything up to sort of $500, $1,000, sometimes only $100. It depends what account it is and how it works out. My concern around this, I don't think it's a particularly desirable aspect of it, because some of these companies are asking for your access to ID and create bank accounts on your behalf. This is a bit of a worrying development from my perspective, and something that, obviously the bookmakers are worried about, because they've got Austrac looking at them and working out what they're doing and making sure that they've got source of funds and all that sort of stuff and anti-money laundering stuff. It's a questionable practice in my eye, and something that, I don't know what regulator, because we have a mismatch of gambling regulators in this country, Tim, but one of the regulators probably needs to look at in order to make sure that this doesn't become, more widespread.
And what's interesting about that bowling article that you put together is, and you didn't name the financial institution, but I've got an account with that bank, and I use it for, not for bowling, but for deposit, betting money or that sort of use it, withdraw and deposit, because it's not my main account. If you, going to refinance or whatever, just keeping it sort of hands off from your main financial institution. So for that reason, that's why I'm using it. Obviously, others are using that bank for other, bowling purposes, and because it's probably ease of not tracking the money, but it's just, it separates from your main banking, and that's more I'm not sure it's an industry thing to crack down on. It's more, wider than that, financial institutions and how they manage that, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess there is it's against the rules of racing in most jurisdictions in Australia to bet from a third-party account. So therefore, if you're a registered owner or whatever else, you can actually, if you're found to have been bowling, you can actually be fined or suspended, or there's a variety of sort of options you can sort of find yourself with that as well. So it's interesting. There is sort of some form of way of discouraging this, but it feels like this industry is evolving in a way. And some of these companies that are offering this, Tim, they're popping up effectively overnight. They're only 2 to 3 months old. They go through the spring carnival. You get saturated with ads. If you're like me, Tim, and you're looking through Instagram or TikTok, there's no shortage of people willing to make your money. There's this match betting strategy around about bonus bets and deposit matches in order to sort of arbitrage them and make money out of them. So it's quite a complex beast, but I think it's one that, for me, it highlights the example of why we probably need a national regulator in the wagering space in order to make sure that things are done properly. I know the big guys the big bookies have got their teams or got their technology in terms of being able to keep on top of this. But what it does, and it sort of parlays into the next conversation I want to have about Entain. Entain obviously defending quite serious civil charges brought by Austrac. potential fines in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Effectively, this involves 17 accounts which have been operated by people which AUSTRAC claims are, have a questionable source of funds and where that's coming from and whether that's hooked around with possible money laundering or counter-terrorism funding issues. So it sort of feeds into this broader challenge around racing about source of funds and where things are coming from. Entain, by the way, just an update on that, have sort of said they will defend this relatively strongly should it go to court. They are still trying to pursue a settlement with AUSTRAC, but it's an interesting one because we kind of thought that maybe Entain might be like, all right, we'll just take our punishment and walk on. But they're quite strongly defending, and they're saying that they took all the advice that was given to them in terms of their AML programs. They've admitted that they were probably short of the mark, but that was the industry standard and where things were at that stage, and they'd followed all the instructions they could do. So it's an interesting argument to try to make. It could prove to be a winning one for them if they can escape these charges, and I think it'll be a massive blow for AUSTRAC if that happened because this has never been tested in this way in court before. But what it might do the other way could backfire and end up in, rather than sort of coming up with a settlement, which is more modest, they could end up in $400, $500 million worth of fines. So a little bit of a gamble, I suppose, for some aspects, but Entain are pretty strong on the fact that they've got a case to argue here. Finally, Tim, I'll just go on an interesting perspective. betr released their results, quarterly results yesterday. Positives for them. Turnover's up. They believe they're taking market share. Obviously, they've been heavily involved in this points bet stuff, but at this stage, they say that that's been a good investment for them. They've got 27.7% of points bet. Moving beyond the sort of balance sheet, what they did say is they're seeing a material uplift from the amount of people using Sky Racing on their site. So they put Sky Racing on their site, I think it was earlier this month, Tim, and they're saying that people are far more engaged with their betting product because they've got Sky Racing. It'll be interesting moving forward to see what that looks like, Jim. Broadcast or the concept of having on your phone the power to watch things. We know that Sportsbet have got it. We know that Tab have obviously got it, and now betr have got it. How important is it, do you think, that people have access on mobile phones to vision in order to watch races and watch things evolving when they're betting? Do you think is it a must? Got to be a must-have moving forward for bookies?
Oh, I think it is. I'm not sure if I've said it before, but my teenage son's playing cricket now in sort of, again, in men's grades or, older, as well as his underage cricket. And he said he wants me to play, which is ridiculous. I said I've been involved for 25 years, but
not that way. You're involved in that way.
He said, no, Dad, you'll fit right in because some of my teammates had to run off the field so they could watch a race while they were fielding. He said, sorry, I'm not, just keep playing, but I've got to run off to watch a race on the phone. So that shows how important it is to have vision like that. And I think that's to racing's advantage, that you can do other things.
I blame Blogsy. He's got people too excited about racing that to run up a cricket pitch to watch a race. But anyway, I did one stage when my bread cricket career did get myself out so I could watch the 1997 Cox played. So I was quite glad that I was dismissed for a very badly made five and ended up going to watch Dane Ripper, as I recall, with the Cox played.
Hansie O'Brien there. Okay, good on you, Hansie. Bren, just one thing, there's a bit of breaking news coming through just while we're recording this, that Tanya Fullerton's been appointed permanently as CEO of the Melbourne Racing Club, and Jonathan Munns has joined the board, obviously after Tom Riley left as CEO in June, and John Kanga's resigned a couple of weeks ago just on the eve of the carnival. So that's interesting industry news as well from, race club executive level.
Yeah, we'll take a bit of time to digest that one, I think, Tim. That's a very interesting development. And, I think it's interesting to see Jonathan Munns. A couple of people have called him out. Wayne Hawke called him out and said, if you're going to do it, come out and put if you're going to be part of the background, you might as well be part of the foreground and be a part of it. So that's a fascinating development. We'll see how that goes on the next few weeks. But interesting times at the MRC. Might explain why my phone's been melting down while we've been on this podcast. So, Tim, always great to catch up. Enjoy Cup Week. Thanks for joining us on Straight Talk, everybody. Brought to you by our fabulous sponsors, Inglis and Darley. Don't forget to give us a rating wherever you're listening to us, and be sure to subscribe. Check out our offering to sign up as a member of the Straight now. Special discount there if you want to apply that. But we've obviously opened that up. You'll see more and more of our articles will become members only in the coming weeks. So I encourage you to get involved in that. Send us an email, editor@thestraight.com.au. Let us know what you think about what we're talking about and anyone we should be talking to. We'll talk to you again next week.